While the panel settles down, may I request Namita Gokhale to say a few words? Thank you.
The Phantom's Howl. Tell me how many of you love to be scared? Everyone. It's a fundamental biological evolutionary urge to know when to be scared. And horror books train you for it very well. It's a special delight to be here for such a confluence of reasons. I've had a very long connection with Arundhati and her family. In many ways, this festival itself is a consequence of the magnificent and eventful literature festival her father-in-law, Himachal Shom, organized in Imrana in 2002 for the ICCR. And for this festival, I was the slogger-in-chief. The other connectivity is that both Sanjoy Roy and I have an affinity to the ghostly and the paranormal. And I say this with his consent. In fact, his next book is going to be even spookier than The Phantom's Howl. And I have indeed myself written a ghost novel. It's called The Book of Shadows, and it is ghost written by a ghost, if you can unravel that. But most of all, because these classic tales of ghosts and hauntings from Bengal are part of a venerable genre and tradition. They have a deep literary quality and are also full of fancy and whimsy. And Arundhati's accomplished translation brings each story to life again for a new generation. So congratulations, Arundhati and Speaking Tiger, for this precious collection of the spooky and the macabre. And here's to things that go bump in the night. Thank you for launching it at Jaipur.
Reading this collection reminded me, and it's been a long time since I read a Bangla ghost story, and it reminded me of the particular pleasure of it, and it's a very specific pleasure in a way that I had not entirely remembered. There is, if you think of the, what I will caricature as the Friday the 13th version of the ghost story or its descendants. This is nothing like that. And there's several things that stand out. One, that it's simply not ghoulish. There's nothing ghoulish about it. There's nothing, the play on the physical repulsion is not there. You never feel there'll be vomit throwing up in it. The sense of the otherworldly is otherworldly. It touches, it hints, it flirts with you, but it doesn't actually. Whatever happens that's scary happens off camera. There is this moment in one of the stories which is pretty scary, but whatever happens during the story, you hear in retrospect after it's been over and the protagonists have been saved. And in that sense, it's precisely the fact that you can construct a ghost story out of essentially hints, things that happen, sort of go bump in the night, but never bump on you directly. And I think that particular sense of a ghost story, which to me was it was a reminder. And this is a collection of a set of wonderful stories, some absolute classics like Bibhutibhushan, some I didn't know, some maybe I read but had forgotten. It made me realize that the act of recovering them is also an act of redefining the genre. It's a genre that doesn't really exist in English very much at all. If anything, there are antecedents there in Edgar Allan Poe and in Maupassant, maybe in French, but it's as a contemporary genre, it doesn't exist, and in some ways it demands a certain a revival that's precisely, in a sense, the kind that Arundhati is offering. So I enjoin you to read the book, savor it, do what I did as a child, wrap myself in a blanket, because I really, I found the openness of the world very scary. And we would have these rainy days when, you know, some aunt or uncle or somebody would be telling a ghost story, and their voice would go around to a whisper and climb to a shriek, and I would be wrapped around and in a sheet or a blanket, trying to keep myself from, trying to think of ways where I could wrap myself even further in, while always making sure that I'm getting access to the telebhaja, the pakoras and the chai that came with it. So get your telebhaja, get your chai, get your blanket, and read the book.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Banerjee. Thank you, Namita. Thank you, Ravi. It's a special moment, I think, for all of us, Ela, Preeta, Sharupa, and all my colleagues, because this year at the Jaipur Literature Festival, we've had 2 colleagues who have released their books. Meenakshi did it a couple of days ago on her story, her family history, and now Arundhati in this fabulous translation. And of course, Eric is in the audience waiting to release his book soon. When it arrived on my table, and you know, I have homework reading because my colleagues think that I should navigate or moderate sessions that other people won't. In the midst of that, I got this book. And I immediately, like Professor Banerjee said, picked it up and started reading. And what a wonderful read. So I'm going to start, Arundhati, by asking you to tell us, what is the difference between a Shachunni and a Petni? What is the difference between a Dak Bangalore Bhoot and the king of Bhoots, Bhoot Raja?
So they're all parts of the Bengali imagination, literary tropes, and we've grown up on these tales. The Dak Bungalow booth is a very interesting booth. It is there when you go to a forested Dak Bungalow or anywhere on a holiday. At night, when you've just had your meal, you're going to be going to bed, you will hear the sounds of the Dak Bungalow goat, or you will see their sudden arrival, or there'll be a sound, there will be a huge window closing somewhere, and you will know that the ghost exists, whether you see the booth or not. And the Petni, of course, is the really superwoman, I feel, because she can do anything. She can extend her arm and get you a lemon freshly plucked while her husband is waiting with hot rice, waiting for her for his meal after their wedding. And but she can do whatever she wants, but she's a dissatisfied soul.
And who's the one with the turned around feet? So just remember,
backwards.
if you see a person with
feet which go back,
which go turned around, you know it's a Shachuni, run. You know, most importantly.
And they are hanging usually from these trees at night, where the Brahmadaityas also stay.
And what about the unhappy souls who hang about?
So they are the Pretattas. They are there. They are always there. They are lurking. And you can feel them. You certainly can, because you know them. You encounter them. So they're there all the time. I think the most important part of Bengal and the ghost stories we grew up in was because we accepted them as part of our daily lives. They were there. The ghost stories were not fearsome. They were amused acceptance of this world which existed, and it was also like a roller coaster ride for me. When my grandmother, who I have dedicated this book to, she used to tell me these stories, I used to devour them with relish, because every story was different, and she'd keep me hanging like OTT of now. She'd not finish it at night. She'd say, next tomorrow, kalke abar. So we just keep waiting. And one of the best stories was from her own life, which was like a shocker. Apparently, she was at the Satyanarayan Puja in her own house, and while seeing the puja, she fell asleep. And when she woke up, the person she had fallen asleep on the lap of was her uncle. He found his arms tied with a small phite, a fita, which we call in Bengali is a ribbon. And she found herself being dragged on the one side by ghosts. And apparently she was being pulled back by humans. And if one more staircase she had gone and crossed over to the terrace of her house, she'd be dead. And she'd end it with saying it was just one stair. And that's it. And that would be it. And I'd be gone. I'd be dead. You wouldn't found me. And then that was what she ended with a relish, and we would be enthralled as children. And this kind of egged me on to discover this world of ghosts, because there are just legions of them. And as I translated these and I went through the stories, I found there were many which were not so known. I mean, Kudito Pashan is known, which is Tagore, and then Vibhutibhushan stories are known. But there was some, which is in fact the one which is Phantom Howl, which is not a very well-known story, the title. And then there is, which is called Pretir Kanna. And then there is this, the one which is Amarendranath Munshi's, which I found was amazing, which was about the water, inside the water spinach forest marsh, where this girl, lonely girl, rows a boat endlessly. She doesn't give up. And there's a child of 15 who encounters her at night. And then, of course, the one you liked a lot was The Signal, which was...
But I'm going to get you to read, but let's go back to the idea of ghosts. It's not unique necessarily to India or whatever. You have in Mexico the Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
And in Bengali tradition, we have a pre-Kali Pujo.
Yes.
We have
Bhoot Chaturdashi.
Bhoot Chaturdashi, which translates loosely into the night of the dead or the night of the souls.
Yeah. So what is interesting is that night before Kali Puja, and this is something which my mother-in-law, who's in the audience, Reba Shom, explained to me, and I was impressed by it, because apparently you need to appease the 14 of your ancestors with 14 diyas you light, because they will be coming, wandering around, hovering, and they'll come down to earth on that night. So you appease them, and you light those diyas. And what got me thinking is how fascinating is the relationship of Bengal with these ghosts. So you're actually waiting and keeping your hearth alight for them so that they can come, and you're welcoming them in a way. And this is also before the puja of a goddess, Kali. This is the night before Kali Puja, a goddess who actually roams around cremation grounds, and she wears a necklace of skulls. Her bindi is made of blood. So how much more gory can you be? And yet it is so spiritual, it is so intense, and she's power. And yet she's of the dead. So I think there then lies a very interesting relationship.
Many of us think that there's going to be just one ghost who'll arrive and do ghostly kind of things. In one of the stories, there's a whole army of ghosts who arrive. Did you want to read from that or tell us a little bit about that?
So that was an interesting story which I found. It is called Signal in the translation. There is this person who's a recluse who writes to his friend, and he goes wandering off, and he's found a desolate house in the middle of Ara district, and where he finds that this actually belonged to this Kumar Dalpat Singh, who was a rebel in the 1857 rebellion, and he was the principality, the king of that principality. So he apparently was mercilessly killed by British spies because his cousin betrayed him through a signal, which was waving of a handkerchief on the first floor of the house. And this man, who's a recluse and a writer, has found this house, and he's come to rent this place, and it's completely derelict. There is no one living there. And his friend is very surprised that why has he gone here? Has he gone mad? And the friend arrives to find out what is going on with his friend so that they can take him back to civilization and perhaps seek medical help for him. And then the rest is the story.
Did you want to read a little bit from there?
So what has happened is, in this, I'll just read a part of it. And one of the occasions, they actually were looking at the house, and they were looking around all the little crevices. And by mistake, they find that same handkerchief. And the friend, by mistake, waves it from the window of the house. And his host, who lives there, is horrified. And he says, what have you done? Now they'll come back. Like sinister ghouls, they will come back and they will take us. They will kill us. So they're waiting that night. And of course, he's been rubbished by his more skeptic friend. So I'll just read. We sat down together to eat. The kerosene lamp flickered. Silence hung in dense folds around us. The air was still. Even with the windows open, we felt no breeze. Not a single lamp seemed lit in the colony outside. I had seen electric wires and poles in these lanes. The homes had electric supply too. Had a fuse blown in their electric line? When I expressed my concern out loud, Boshonto let out a bitter laugh. You just noticed this? I had observed. with all our might to peer. Sorry, I got the wrong page. I had observed it a while ago. No light can be seen anywhere. Usually in the evening, the entire colony is lit up by electric lamps, but tonight is different. No fuse has blown, my friend. Each home here has 100 light bulbs, and you are only thinking of the lack of lights. I am also sensing the lack of songs on the radio and music from the gramophone records I hear every day. Not one sound can be heard today. The world outside has been cut off from this house. They have cut us off. This impenetrable darkness outside, it is otherworldly. The darkness of the land of phantoms and ghosts. It is not of this world. Something gave in inside me. Leaping up, I pulled Boshunto by hand and I said, "Fine, let's go. Let us leave this instant. Like you said, we'll spend tonight in the hotel. I don't believe a word of the nonsense you're spouting, but since you are petrified, we cannot stay in this house a minute longer. Come." As we left the room, Boshunto cautioned, "Sure, let's go, but we won't be able to go far. They have arrived and have encircled the house. To leave now is akin to jumping into their arms. Though that too is irrelevant, since we will die anyway, a minute or two before doesn't matter." By this time, I too was convinced that something untoward was about to happen. It was almost as though I could smell the pungent stench of blood everywhere. The air was suffocating in its stillness, but strange, sibilant sounds were emanating from somewhere, as if people were whispering close to us. An unholy presence had taken hold of this massive walled territory. We needed to get out at any cost.
The other story that was fascinating again was a story where this bed suddenly becomes the sort of center of everybody's attention. Did you want to read a little bit from there?
This particular story is by Bibhutibhushan. It's called The Spectral Bed, in which the bed is possessed. And it is actually apparently called a Chinese bed. It's of Chinese make, and these two friends go to Chinatown in Kolkata to purchase this.
They read an ad. They read an ad, and they're attracted by that ad. There's bed for sale for, I think, 1,000 rupees.
Finally, I think 1,000, 1,500 or something. And then they manage to get the bed back, and then all kinds of weird things happen in the bed. So one night, after the bed had acted up, the two friends decided to be together. So there is one passage in that which I'll read out. "I looked out of an open window into a tiny slice of the sky that was visible and didn't shift my gaze. Countless stars twinkled, mocking our troubles. As we continued to sit in complete silence, the electric bulb in the room suddenly went off. As you can see, always the lights go off in every one of these stories. We both shouted together in chorus, 'Who's there?' It was almost as if someone had tripped the main electric switch of the house. And then an ugly and booming laugh filled the room. I had never in my life heard laughter like that before. It seemed endless. The horrid sound just wouldn't stop. Ha, 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 he, it went on. Absurd and otherworldly. We felt the presence of someone standing by the door next to the bed, being driven crazy with mirth. I trembled with fear. Satish quickly shone a torch at the door. But this seemed to have the opposite effect. Now it felt as though someone was sitting by the window directly across the door and howling in loud, copious sobs. We could decipher no sounds in that crying. All we heard was a tragic wail which went around the room, each strain a ghoulish cry, a step towards death. Finally, the crying reached the bed and it was held captive there. Its tears soaking the fateful object that had unleashed this rather unbelievable chain of events.
This wonderful collection that you've translated, Arundhati, how did you come across this? I mean, I think in 1903 was the first collection of ghost stories,
Yes.
which was our grandmother's basket of stories, Thakurmar Jhuli.
Which had a foreword by Tagore, in fact. So I, like all Bengali kids, grew up on Thakurmar Jhuli. It was read to by my mother, who is in the audience. And then she taught me how to read in Bengali. So I went and read it on my own, and I enjoyed. There was a tale of Bangoma and Bangomi, and these birds who were funny looking, and diseases in which your bones rattled. The har murmuri and all that. So there were fascinating stories. We grew up on this, and I had this old dog-eared copy, a blue copy with this silver lettering. And a lot of the stories I read, I still possess the books. And when my boys were younger, I used to read out to them and try and tell them in sort of Pidgin Bengali, half English, made some notes. And And of course, my friend Sudeshna Shom Ghosh at Speaking Tiger was one day said to me that these are lovely stories. When you tell them, your eyes light up. So why don't you take a crack at translating them? And then I spoke to Namita, and she was so encouraging, as always, as a powerhouse. And then I just decided to dive in, and as I read more, I went into this, the Shuktara collection, which has 101 ghost stories, the old magazine Shuktara in Bengal. I found the stories, some of them were amazing, and they were old. These are all late 19th century to early 20th, mid-20th century. But yet, there was a universal flavor which would appeal to audiences and readers now. And of course, in the translation, I changed a little bit of the olden context, made it little to modern readership. And I just found each one of them had a unique character, spoke a unique idiom. And that was amazing.
How many of you are believers of ghosts and other things? Your son's refusing to put up his hand, so he doesn't think he's a believer at all. Ravi, this is such a fabulous collection, and I hope there's going to be a second and a third series on this, and hopefully Speaking Tiger will make lots of money, and so will Arundhati, but let me ask you to say a few words.
Well, nothing much to say. I'm just glad that you were persuaded to translate these.
Thank you.
And, it's sort of over 30 years now since I've been living on my own, alone. And I always tell people, yaar, mat bola karo, because dar lagta hai, I live alone, don't ghost stories. But there are some books which, you love hearing them, and it's got that quality where it's almost like you're hearing, people telling you. And the greatest thing is, you haven't read an excerpt where people should buy and discover that for themselves, is the humor in it. It isn't just, scary stuff. It's also very funny. And so therefore, even when I'm alone, even at this age, I can read this even at night. It really is wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. I think Bengali ghosts have a lot of humor. They're never scary. There is always fun. There is always fun.
Well, I hope this becomes a series for OTT, but before that, do please buy your copies and get it signed. Thank you so much, Arundhati. Thank you, Namita. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you all so much. The Phantoms Howl.